This is Top of Mind, the Dr. Patrick Slowinski Show.
Hello and welcome back to Top of Mind, where we dive into the ideas, trends, and people shaping the future. I'm your producer, Victor Olenik, and thanks for tuning in.
All right. Well, thank you, Producer Victor, for that wonderful intro. It's good to be back with you. And I actually am taking a trip down nostalgia lane today with two of my friends. It's one of them on the right side here, Mara Burr, was my boss. She was a fantastic boss. And so she is on the show with us. Returning to Top of Mind is Shenoa Simpson. And she is an AI expert, but also a former diplomat. And she's working. You can please visit her on LinkedIn and other places. She's done a lot of great innovative work on AI and where the direction is going. And you can check out our episode with Shenoa and her colleague on Top of Mind as well. And Mara Burr is just, there's nothing this woman cannot do. She always was trying to get me to do tough mothers, right? Is it mothers?
Tough Mudder, yeah. We kept trying to do it.
Yeah, no. I'd just be like, no, I'm a doctor. No. And she's like, there's lots of doctors, like real ones, like medical doctors out there. I was like, no, I'm not doing it. But really a wonderful, wonderful friend. Lots of federal experience from Health and Human Services to USTR to FDA. Adjunct professor of law at Georgetown University. Prolific writer and a dear friend who really knows the workplace, both the private and public sector. And with Shenoa and Mara and I, all three of us have in common is that we've all worked in both the public and private sectors for pretty good chunks of time. So that's going to be our discussion. So without further ado, and please, Shenoa and Mara, add anything that I missed on your bios. We're also going to put links in for people to check out your bios after the show. But I want to get us start talking about the workforce today. So we're in the middle of a shutdown, day 9. I think all of us went through a government shutdown.
Yes, several.
Yes, a few of them, right? Not fun. Do you see light at the end of the tunnel? I hope so. Somebody has to give, right?
You think, and I mean, at this point, I'm hearing from, both Democrats and Republicans that this is a waste of time, a waste of energy. People need to get back to work. So, the next step are getting people in the room together, talking and coming out with solutions. And I think, even if there's agreement on bringing the shutdown to an end, it doesn't seem that our political leaders can get in a room together anymore and talk to each other. And that's probably the saddest part of the entire news system we're seeing right now is that, it used to be you'd have different views and different perspectives, but you could always sit down and talk through them. And I think the three of us are proof of that. We don't always see eye to eye on everything, but we've always talked through our differences and come to a better conclusion because we had the chance to listen to each other's perspectives and actually come to a resolution that made sense. So, I just hope we can get back to that in Washington. I think we're just far too polarized and I don't think we're as polarized as we think we are, but it's a self-cycling issue right now and it's just too bad.
Yeah, no, and perception becomes reality real quick. And I think you're right about that. And, I think you mentioned something very powerful in terms of conflict resolution and just negotiating in general is that people can have ideas you don't agree with, and they may even be bad ideas, but that doesn't make them bad. And I think we're past that. I think that people are associating ideas with someone's character. And then, then you have the issue with Charlie Kirk because of that. And so we've gone really, really far. Psychologists are looking at our behavior and just freaking out. I'm an industrial and organizational psychologist, in addition to an educational psychologist. And, my colleagues are very concerned about, what this means for the workplace. If people cannot, work with other people who have different ideas and thoughts and beliefs, what they're going to do. Shenoa, we've got the shutdown going on in the government sector, the public sector at the federal level. What are you seeing in the private sector? Is there any influence, any runoff from that, or is people just plugging along?
I really feel for everybody who's in the shutdown at the moment, because I'm sure that they're weighing their options, like we all probably did at some point. I know when I had a shutdown, I was in Iraq, and I thought, wow, I'm in Iraq and I'm not going to get paid. Like, how does this work out? So for me, that definitely sent me down am I going to stay or am I going to go? And that's kind of where I started to think about things. It is a tough job market right now. I would say that, tech is really suffering. And so if people think that, the AI is the place to go right now, it may not necessarily be, unless you can kind of craft a way to go into it that's really meaningfully long term. I know people reached out to me and said, hey, well, what are you doing? And I think whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, you have to think about having different income streams and playing different roles. And what they call it like fractional working, or if you want to be senior and cool, you can call yourself a fractional executive. And a lot of it's about
like math. I think for some people they would be like
fractional. Yeah. If you don't like math, don't say you're fractional. Just say you're whole.
So that's something that in your bio I saw that you openly embrace that title as a fractional.
I do. I really believe that the way forward is multiple income streams. And I think it's hard. It's getting really hard to be reliant on one income stream, whether you're a public sector or private sector, because if something like this happens in the public sector, what do you do? If you lose your job in the private sector, what do you do? And there's a lot of different options out there. I've started to get out more on social media. It's increasingly becoming important in the age of AI to show your face and be a real human being. But that's what I would encourage people to do, is kind of like, I found what was called my pro voice and looking at becoming a fractional executive. So that's my 2 cents.
Awesome. Well, I brought you both on the show because I wanted to take a look and have a discussion on generational, not gaps per se, but differences, and how younger people and people our age and people older are looking at the world of work and opportunities. And so I want to start with our good old friend here. I don't know if you've either seen any of his clips, Simon Sinek, that he talks a little bit about this. So producer Victor, could you get us started with the first video that's going to be some schema for us to discuss further?
You are in a very difficult and uncomfortable position, because I think leadership is more difficult now than it has ever been, because you're dealing with human anxiety, you're dealing with human uncertainty, you're dealing with human ambition and human egos, and again, especially young people who think they know what they want and don't, who have certainty and are very outspoken and do not mind going around their boss's boss to come to you. So you're going to be dealing with a 19-year-old saying, "Why am I not given this?" And you're like, "I don't need, where do you work?" They have no fear of doing that. They also have no fear of quitting. And so we've seen this pattern where, remember, they're as a young generation, they're actually less equipped to deal with stress than previous generations. And so anxiety is high, and they're very confrontation avoidant. So for example, we've seen this, where they feel like they deserve a raise, and they don't know how to ask for a raise. And so instead of asking for a raise, they'll just quit. And then sometimes with an email that says, "You don't value me, you don't pay me enough," you're like, we just had to ask. The answer, we love you, So they're not afraid of quitting, but they are afraid of asking for things. Or if they do ask for things, it sometimes comes across very aggressive or accidentally black and white. Like, I've been here 8 months, and I would like a 50% raise. And I'm not exaggerating.
So he goes on to talk about, what are the ways to meet them where they are. And I certainly don't want to paint a picture that all young people fall into that category. But those are things that, values don't always transfer over to each generation. What's important for one isn't always important to the next. But what's interesting to me in the recent research that's been done by psychologists on this is that you have employers now not putting up with that. And they're actually going to the 50-year-old who's going to show up and do the job and not complain too much and provide some value added and actually get the job done. And they won't have to haggle with the constant, pushback that they get from the younger employees. What are you guys seeing in terms of new people, younger people coming into the workforce? Are you seeing any kind of trends, if it will, positive or something that could be improved? Shenoa, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say that the younger generation, like me having a son who's like a teenager going to college, like it's definitely a different mindset. And I don't think it's actually a negative thing. I think that, the way corporate America has worked has been very compliance oriented. I worked in compliance, so I can say that. But there's been like a series of policies that govern behavior and how you act and the way that you conduct yourself. And I think that a lot of this generation is going to have to be very entrepreneurial. There's not going to be a lot of corporate jobs for them. And I think they recognize that if I want to get ahead, I'm going to have to figure it out. So I'm not going to play by the rules anymore. I don't think it puts them at a disadvantage. I think it puts them at an advantage because having lived in other countries like we have, I think that they are a little bit more challenging in some countries that are a little more competitive. I think they come up with ideas and they do try to work around it. And so I think that mindset, while we kind of say, well, no, it has to be like this way, it probably does need to change for this generation to be successful.
Professor Burr, you've got college students, you've got law school students at Georgetown, and they're younger. What are you seeing? What are their expectations for when they graduate and their attitudes, primarily their attitudes?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, folks that go to law school are a little bit more traditional in sort of how they view the world. So I think they see the law and traditions and foundations as important. So probably more so than if you have someone going into, marketing or communications or a different field. So I think my students embrace that tradition and see the value in it, but may not embrace the values of, big law firms and the way that many of us came up through the law firm world, in the late 90s when they could really treat you terribly, but they were paying you so you could pay your student loans back, and you really had to just deal with all of the crap that you got from your supervisor or your managing partner or whomever. And I think to some extent, you're seeing a bit of a backlash across the board on that. Again, it's probably not going to be tolerated very well in sort of the legal fields because it is so hierarchical and based on tradition that it's a little bit harder to get away with out of box thinking. But I do think the hierarchical structure, the corporate mindset, has over the last several decades really, on the one hand, embraced creativity and outside the box thinking, while on the other hand, really tried to clamp down on it. So it's been, and since you're the psychologist, Patrick, I guess if I said bit of a schizophrenic approach, maybe that would be right. I don't know. I'm not good at
Manic, I think would be a better word.
There we go. And so, I think we haven't always given the right signals to the workforce. And I think corporate America is now seeing that, they can't rely on people for, several decades once they join the company if they're not going to treat them well, if they're not going to have the right kind of benefits, if they're not going to pay them. And that lack of loyalty is starting to go both ways. And I think, if you want loyalty and you want loyal employees and you want employees to be able to speak out, then you have to create the culture to allow them to be able to do so, and to know who they're supposed to talk to and to know what the process looks like. And I think for a lot of young people, there's just nowhere to learn that until you get your first job and you make a bunch of mistakes because nobody tells you what the ropes are. And so maybe we need to think about that for students in high school and college and graduate school. Maybe there should just be a class on this is what a job is like. This is what you're going to run into because there's not really any training for your first job. I mean, you're technically capable, but you don't understand the politics, you don't understand the hierarchy, you don't understand, company policies. And how many of us have taken, probably in the aggregate years of our lives taking training that had absolutely no relation to what we did every
Yeah.
day, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we have all this training on just irrelevant things that, yeah, of course I shouldn't make inappropriate comments in meetings, and of course I shouldn't call out, what someone's wearing or, their cultural or ethnic background. Yeah, I mean that used to be common sense. Now we feel like we have to teach people common sense. That's I don't know, that's a bit disheartening to me.
Well, and you bring up a very valid point, and that is that it's a two-sided coin, right? It's not only what employers should be expecting from their new workers, but it's also what the employed should be able to reasonably expect from their employers in terms of environment, in terms of onboarding that actually gets to them, that's personalized, and that really includes a lot of motivation. And so I'm going to segue over to another phenomenon that really took off or became, I think it was always lying underneath the world of work, and that's quiet quitting. But it really got the spotlight shined on it during COVID and after COVID. And we saw that people were just like, okay, I still need a paycheck, but if I'm not going to be valued, I'm just going to do enough not to get fired. And so we're going to move over to that discussion because I think it's continuing to persist for people. They're just doing enough because they don't feel that motivation. They don't feel that sense of ownership in the organization. And this is an area where companies and agencies or government entities can do a lot better with, helping their employees work smarter and faster. So producer Victor, can you show us the second clip there?
Called quiet quitting. What is that? What is that all about? Did someone say quiet quitting? It's basically doing the bare minimum at work, but like just enough to not get fired. Oh, kind of like the way I'm about to start quietly retiring. Yes, queen. We love to see it. I gotta be honest here. I am so tired of this quiet quitting stuff. Do people not realize that you're creating more work for the rest of the team when you do that? As if you're the one who ends up picking up all that slack. Right, because that's so annoying. I keep hearing about this thing called quiet.
All right. So I think there's a lot of truth in that. And kudos to the influencer there who did all those roles quite well. I'm Gen X. I embrace it. And I felt like, yeah, I have to do more work because you're not doing your job. So, Mara, what do you think? Your takes, and then we'll go over to Shenoa.
Well, I think we in Gen X, we used to call quiet quitting lazy, slackers. Yeah, we were like, I don't want to work with that person. But again, it's like it's the value proposition and it's the communication and it's the value on both sides. And again, if there's not an atmosphere created where people, one, feel connected to the mission and connected to what's going on, that's a failure on the part of the employer. If the employee doesn't have the drive or ambition to want to own issues or to get better or to be a star, then that's a problem too. And so I would say, this idea that quiet quitting, it's a good thing, or quiet resigning or whatever, it really is the lowest common denominator on both sides, and it's actually quite sad. And so I think if you get to that position, I don't necessarily think it's a cultural thing. I just think we put a name on it. But it's been going on for decades, and we've seen this going on for decades. And what it is a lack of leadership on both sides. And that, you can call it what you want, but both sides are to blame, and both sides need to figure out a way to fix it.
Right. And we could go into compensation and other benefits and motivation to have people. And if companies aren't willing to do that, they shouldn't be surprised when people just do enough and not more. Shenoa, your take on the quiet quitting? I won't ask you to tell us what generation you're in, but
I mean, you know, it's okay. I'm a Zennial, so I'm in between. I'm a betweener. So I've never known a world without Star Wars.
I saw you laughing, a little smiling at least during the little clip. What do you think? Was there some truth in there?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand quiet quitting. It kind of happened around COVID, and people just got really frustrated because they were disconnected and they were pushed to limits. And then, you know, getting fired over, you know, video isn't cool. Like just, you know, the impersonalization of, you know, just do I have a job today or tomorrow? People showing up in the private sector aren't sure if they're going to be working tomorrow, even if they're a high performer. Like I talked to one guy who's like, yeah, I thought I was getting promoted and they got let go. And I was really shocked. But I think we've gone to a place now where it's called job hugging, and it's they've like what's happened since, you know, quiet quitting is a lot of jobs have been outsourced because companies got wise and started saying, you know, hey, what can I do? Like, since anybody can work anywhere, well, I'll just find somebody somewhere else that's cheaper and they can work remotely in what's called a virtual captive, or even just remotely in general. And so all these jobs have started to go overseas. You don't need a visa to come to the United States anymore. The job can just go somewhere else. Yeah. And as a result, I would say, I mean, I don't know what the statistics are, but it's likely there are fewer jobs in the US and they've gone somewhere else. So that now when companies are looking around, they're not necessarily looking locally. And so people are hanging on to their jobs for dear life because of this whole AI thing, which I think at the end of the day, you're just going to need people to do the work anyway. It's a little bit of a scare tactic to kind of say, oh, AI is going to take your job. It's just trying to drive productivity. And I think that's part of what the narrative is. It's like, oh, these quiet quitters, just wait, AI is going to come take your job. And it's a little bit of a falsehood. So that's my view.
Right. And then you also have people that are doing multiple jobs, whether disclosing them or not, just because the economic situation is tough. And if you know you have to work several jobs to make ends meet, you're not going to be as motivated. You're not going to be as pleasant at work when you're just exhausted and you're trying to do the best you can. And you're not rewarded for that, for the ability to do it. In fact, if people find out, you could be in some kind of trouble. But I wanted to just finish up with this discussion of quiet quitting, because Newtonian physics also says, you know, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And there is a phenomenon called quiet firing. We're going to talk about that in a second, but I wanted to Office Space just has the best clips ever. So go ahead and Victor, play that one.
We're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day at work. So if you would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door, that way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour.
Space out?
Yeah, I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
Peter, would you be a good sport and indulge us and just tell us a little more?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about TPS reports.
TPS stands for?
The thing is, Bob, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
Don't care?
It's a problem of motivation, all right? Now, if I work my ass off and Initech ships a few extra units, I don't see another dime. So where's the motivation? And here's something else, Bob. I have 8 different bosses right now.
Beg your pardon?
8 bosses.
8?
8, Bob. So that means that when I make a mistake, I have 8 different people coming by to tell me about it. That's my only real motivation, is not to be hassled. That and the fear of losing my job. But you know, Bob, that'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
I think that sums it up on the quiet quitting part. I don't think there's another clip that can do it any better. But I did want to talk about the opposite coin, right? Clearly, there's a lot organizations can do. There's this whole concept or construct we study in industrial organizational psychology called organizational commitment. And it's really how an employee feels connected to their organization in a way that makes them feel, maybe it's actual tangible connection, like in benefit and dividends, stock dividends, or ability to buy stock options, or to, different types of work agreements that they can do. They can go work in another country and come back, or whatever it is. But there is the other side of the coin, the quiet firing. And so how does that work? I think we all know how it works, but it'd be interesting for you two to tell our viewers here, what is quiet firing, and do you think this is going to continue with the quiet quitting? Will they eventually cancel each other out? How's that all going to work? Mara, we'll start.
Oh, sure. I was going to say, quiet firing, in the federal government, right? If you have a low performer, it takes at least 2 years to get to a point where you might be able to fire them. And normally your HR is telling you, just work it out, find a way to work it out. And normally what happens is the person just gets less and less and less responsibility. They stay at their pay grade, they stay at their GS level and their step, but they just have not a lot of responsibility. Now, I don't know if people view that as a benefit or a burden, but you just start being irrelevant, and you stop getting invited to meetings and whatever. So I mean, for high performing individuals who try and work in pressure filled places, that's the writing on the wall. So do you want to stay there and be irrelevant, or do you want to move on and be relevant? I think in companies where pretty much everyone's an at-will employee, it just is such strange cultural phenomena. I mean, some places you go, they want high performers, but they want groupthink. So they want you only to high perform to the extent that you're performing in the way they want you to perform. But if you have ideas other than the leadership, or you actually do think outside the box, that actually creates fear. And so you go from being a top performer, a creative, intellectual, to actually someone who they fear. And so the quiet firing is, again, and I think it's more acute for high performers. You just see that you're starting to become disconnected from the leadership. And normally that's a bright flashing red sign.
Right.
But
You're not included on the email for a meeting. You're not the one selected to do the training. You're not the one that's going to the conference, and you used to be. And so It's kind of a passive aggressive way to get people to quit. So there's not a lot of firing actually going on. It's actually this passive aggressive and sometimes aggressive behavior by the bosses to move people into a spot where they just want to quit. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what was alluded to in the clip. You can only take that fear of being fired so much. And so, one interesting factoid, when I was a career counselor back in the early 2000s at a large tier 1 university, and I had people come in and talk to me all the time about what they want to do, where they want to go, I would always pull out these statistics saying that, the average person changes jobs 5 times. It was about 5 times. You know what it is now?
What? 20?
It is about 15 to 16 times.
Oh, wow.
And, and some of those are drastic. They're not just staying in the same sector. They're actually moving to completely different sectors, which was unheard of before. The connection between education and what you actually do as a job is less than it used to be by far. People value formal education, employees do, but they don't necessarily have to take that and put you right in the box that you got your education. STEM, yes, but in other areas, not necessarily. So over to you, Shenoa. Your idea of quiet firing, do you think the people just make it so visible for you that you just quit?
Yeah, I think it can, quiet firing, I think, can be very different in the private sector versus the public sector. I think in the, in government, you can push somebody off to the side and not give them any activity, and it's fine, they're getting paid. I think it becomes very different in the private sector because I think they just give you undesirable work that makes you miserable. So, and then like there's this thing with overworking people too. Like if you give somebody way too much work, you're really trying to push them out the door. Especially a lot of miserable work. That's a bad combination. It doesn't work.
Not exciting work, not top dollar, high flying asset work. Just work that needs to be done, but that's not necessarily at your level of expertise.
Exactly. Something that's kind of a grind and you're clearly not getting any rewards or accolades. And I think it does light a fire. Like, I think people use it as a tool, like it's kind of a weaponization of it because managers will start to kind of do it just to push somebody a little further. And then maybe they'll fall back into good graces. But at the end of the day, you don't, if you start recognizing it, it's good not to stick around because you don't want to be on a list because eventually the company will bring in a consultant who will say, oh yeah, you can increase your productivity by getting rid of these people and bringing in AI or something. And you don't want to be on the list of people who are going to be out the door. You kind of want to have a game plan before you go. And yeah, I think it's just, unfortunately, I would call it as pretty weaponized right now. So.
Yeah, but I do think I'm teaching a course right now at a university online, just basic life and study skills. And it's one of my favorite classes to teach. I've noticed that a lot of people coming up, they don't have a very good grasp of English vocabulary. They have a very limited vocabulary. They're not well read. They don't go and read just for fun. They have different things that are going to be minuses for them, and when they're still competing with people from different generations, right? And that's the thing, is the competition isn't just in your generation. You could be competing with people with tons of more experience. So that's not enough that you're younger, or that maybe on the other side that you have all this experience. It's not enough. You have to be, what I tell my students in this course, eclectic. You have to have a whole bunch of different skills and interests that you can bring to the table to set you apart. So I wanted to close our discussion, which has been fabulous, by the way, with Mara, who brought up to me before we had the show and we were just kind of brainstorming ideas for it. Attitude. What kind of people do we want working in the workforce in the United States, and what kind of values? Are there at least agreed values, some that we all can agree on, no matter where we come from politically or spiritually or whatever, that we could say, this is, employers are looking for this and employees are looking for this? Mara, start with you and go to Shenoa. What kind of attitude?
Part of the attitude, I think, is, yeah, I mean, if you look at the educational system we're dealing with, from kindergarten, through middle school and high school, you're not seeing that curriculum. I think that Patrick, you and I, and Gen X had a chance to. No, I'm Z, I think. I don't know which one I am now. But anyway, whatever generation I am, we were actually pushed to do all those things, to be well read, to be able to tell a story, to compete in speech competitions and sports, and to be well rounded. It was, you played in the band. I mean, maybe you didn't do all those things really well, but you did them because that's what you did.
Even when you got bullied to no end by the jocks, you still were in the band.
Exactly. Well, that's why you were in the band and you played sports, because that way, you hedged your
You
bets
protect
about who was
yourself.
going to bully you. But I think at the end of the day, like, we're just not pushed to be self-starters, and that has to start early. That has to start with your first educational experience. And I think the attitude has to be, the world is the world. You find the world as it is, not as you'd like it to be. But if you want to contribute, you can change the little bit of the world that you actually have access to. And with enough, determination and grit and persuasion, maybe you'll change a little bit more of the world, just because you're willing to do it. I think that fire needs to be lit again. I think what I am concerned about is, when I was growing up, the mantra was, you're an American, you're very lucky that you were born in this country. You have a responsibility to make the world a better place. Though that is on your shoulders because you are given so much, you need to go out and give back and you need to make the world a better place. I'm not sure that we're teaching our kids that anymore. I'm not sure that that message is resonating anymore. And I think, it's this idea of duties and rights and obligations. And, it's not just a matter of what can I get out of this world, it's what can I also give back. It has to be a balance, right? And I think that is what I'm most concerned about is there's just isn't this attitude that, you know what, I can change the world and I'm going to. Um, and I need help from people to do it. And I can persuade you to get on my team and help me. Um, and I hope that's not being lost in the conversations about what percentage wage increase I'm getting or how many paid holidays I get. Those things are important, but the bigger picture should be what you want to get out of the world because you have one life. You're not guaranteed a number of days or years. You're not guaranteed anything. Um, but you can chart your own path, and that's exciting. And if you have the drive and the grit and the willingness to work, you can do great things. But are we challenging our young people to do great things? I don't know. I don't know that we are effectively communicating that anymore.
Or even our older employees that are going back into the workforce. Are we channeling the passions that are down there somewhere that we can, have them not only be effective employees, but good human beings? And with that, I think I want to turn it over to Shenoa for the last word on this. What you're seeing a lot with AI, the scaring a lot of people that AI is going to come and steal their jobs. So people need to be eclectic. They need to be elastic. They need to be flexible. What are you telling people that come and consult with you about, what am I going to do when AI does everything for me?
Yeah, I think the key is that AI isn't going to do everything for you. I think that they talk about how the AI bubble is about to burst, and I think that's probably about right. We're talking now about what work's coming out of AI, and it's called AI slop, right? So, my personal use with it using, you know, an approved tool at work is, it can take meetings notes for you, but if it's really important and say it's for regulatory purposes, it's not good enough. It doesn't catch things. It doesn't have context. It hallucinates. It probably takes me more time to go over what AI puts out than it actually took me to, like, if I did it myself in the first place. And I think that realization is starting to come around. Everybody's going to have to know how to deal with AI. I've kind of told people you're going to have to know how to deal with AI's failures, and that's a really good job, or how to audit it, because it's not going to do everything that everybody thinks it is. And if you know where it falls apart, then that's kind of your value add. So you know that it hallucinates. You know how to, like, spot that or prevent it. Like, when it's missed things. And it's kind of that critical thinking skill. And I just think it's important to be resilient. Like, I go back to what Mara said, really having that resilience to make it through this whole, hype that's going about. I mean, a lot of it is social media, handles that are just getting attention. But it probably, I mean, Patrick, you know more than me how it psychologically affects people to hear that kind of thing, even if it's not necessarily true. it goes back to resilience, I think. I just hope that this generation's resilient enough to, not give up, but find a way forward and develop their own ideas. That's going to be key.
Very great point in the context of AI. I think I'll just wrap up with the idea that no matter who you are, what age you are, what sector you're going to be working in, whether it be public or private, there's tons of opportunities there for you, for men, for women. You both have had amazing careers, and you've never been the type to say, oh, I can't do this. You just go out and do it. There's lots of opportunities for people out there. Are there challenges? Yes. But I do want to stress the last thing is that employers and organizations are having a renaissance of looking back for good human people. Yeah, good people that are just have good qualities. They're actually nice. Mm-hmm. They're not, so driven by their own hubris that they have to be the best, that they don't mind just cutting someone off at the knees to get ahead. That may work in some sectors to a point, but generally employers are looking for people that are good people. They're just good people. And I think that's another value that needs to be instilled in our educational system, especially our vocational, is that one of the skills you need to develop is just get along with people, even if you don't agree with them. We've seen from recent events that it's so important to talk things out. And you can say, Patrick, you're from Wisconsin, and Mara's from Minnesota, but we still love each other.
I'm from Minnesota too. Is that 2 against 1?
Oh my God.
Thank goodness.
Where's my team's head when I need it? Will protect me from the Vikings.
But we just say Skull a lot. So Skull, Patrick, Skull.
That's right. But yes, all kidding aside, I think both people who want a job, they want employers that are kind and they care about their careers. And on the other end of the other side of the coin, people that are employing people, they don't want a bunch of people that are so into themselves that they can't look across the desk if they're working in the office and see another person that needs help. And so I think that's important. And I do think there's a lot of opportunities out there that AI and other technologies are going to bring that we never would have thought about for people. But we are humans, and I hope that we work on our attributes as well as our skills. So with that, thank you both for coming on the show. It's like we never left our offices together when we worked for the federal government years ago. And it's so good to have you back. And eventually I'll have you both back when we have another panel coming up soon on other issues in the workforce. Thank you so much for this episode. And producer Victor, take us away.
Thank you. And thanks, Victor.
Yeah, thank you both. Really appreciate it. So nice to see Shenoa.
So nice to see you, Mara.
And Patrick, yeah, it's great being here.
Thank you.
Thanks. The pleasure was ours. And to everyone listening, please make sure to share, subscribe, and check out our guest details in the description.
In a world full of noise, clarity is power. Stay informed. Stay aware. Stay top of mind.